Welcome back to the course Millennials and the Millennium. Today we're talking about dispensational premillennialism. Now, the dispensationalist is a literalist. They view all Bible prophecy to be interpreted literally. The Abraham and Davidic covenants are prominent in this particular view. For instance, in 1948, when Israel became a nation again, the dispensationalist believes this fulfills the Old Testament promises by God that the Jews will regain their land. This particular view focuses on national Israel. Another important feature is the distinction between God's purposes for Israel and the church. The two are entirely separate in this view. And as we have already pointed out, a great difference with this view is the pre-tribulational rapture. Dispensational premillennialism is the only view of the four millennial views that ascribes to a pre-trib rapture. Now you'll notice from the graphic I have included under dispensational premillennialism mid-tribulational as well. And within this system there is pre-tribulational and mid-tribulational rapture. However, the predominant view is the pre-trib view. Now, and you notice also the other three views, historic premillennialism, amillennialism, and postmillennialism, are all post-tribulational, meaning that Christ will return after the tribulation. This, of course, does not mean that dispensationalism is incorrect about the tribulation. However, we should be very careful since this fourth view lacks historical value, at least relatively speaking, since it started around the 1830s. In addition to being pre-trib, dispensationalists believe that Jesus returns twice. That's correct, Jesus returns twice. Now, this first time is the secret rapture of the Gentile church. So at the beginning of the tribulation, there is a secret rapture of the church. The second return is what we would consider the second coming, and it is at the end of the 7-year tribulation, which is sometimes called Daniel's 70th week. Now, I want to stop here for just a minute and let everyone catch their breath. I am giving you a lot of details, but this is because this system of theology is very complex and has a lot of very specific details. Each of those details matter, and Daniel chapter 9, specifically verses 24 to 27, is where dispensationalists get their 7-year tribulation. Now, it's actually the last two verses of what I just referenced, is verse 26 and 27. And these two verses are extremely controversial. There's a lot of controversy around these two verses, and I'm going to show you what that is in just a moment. However, dispensational premillennialism, their view of the rapture is essential to their doctrine. It's a very important part of their doctrine, but it's based on these two controversial verses in Daniel. This is verse 26. It says, "And after the 62 weeks Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end of it shall be with a flood, until the end of the war desolations are determined." And verse 27, "Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering." Now, the important thing to remember here is the pronoun he, and you can see it's highlighted there in the verse. We have to know who this he is, because when it says he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, the way the dispensationalist interprets that, number one, he says the he refers to the Antichrist in the future, and the 1 week, that's the 7-year tribulation. So that specific part of this verse, they believe that's talking about the tribulation, and they believe the he is the Antichrist. Now to the controversy. How do you know the he is the Antichrist? Well, obviously it's a pronoun, so it has to refer back to something that precedes it, which goes back to verse 26, which we already read. So what we're going to do, we're going to go back to 26 and see who this mysterious he is. Now, coming back to verse 26, we can see, and I've highlighted it here, it talks about first Messiah. Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. And then it talks about, and the people of the prince. Now, when you go to verse 27, you have the he. He shall confirm a covenant. And when you come back to see who the he refers to, the dispensationalist will tell you, well, it's the prince, because that's the last person mentioned before the he in the next verse. But any English teacher who looks at this text is going to tell you, when it says, and the people of the prince is a prepositional phrase, which means the he can't refer to the prince. It would have to refer to someone before that. Well, it can't be the people. It would have to be Messiah. Now, I'm saying all that to show you why there's this controversy. And you say, well, that's just grammar. Yes, it's just grammar, but it'd be impossible, based on how this is written or how it's been translated, that it would refer to the prince. The other assumption that's made is that this prince that's mentioned isn't Messiah, but is actually the Antichrist or another prince, a human prince. So that's what I'm telling you. There's a lot of division around this verse. Does the he refer to Antichrist or Messiah? Is it the prince or is it Messiah? And it makes a big difference. Grammatically speaking, the he cannot refer to the prince because it's in a prepositional phrase. Now, I'm not saying the dispensationalist is wrong. I'm simply pointing out there are a lot of problems with this view and looking at just these two verses. And this is what you get into when you take a couple of verses and try to develop an entire belief system around it. It can be very dangerous. You have to be very careful about doing that. And a lot of people don't realize the controversy around these verses, especially if you've only heard one of the four views. Okay, I wanted to point all that out so people understand where the dispensationalist is getting the 7-year tribulation. So let's be honest. Certain parts of Daniel are cryptic. They're hard to understand. And we want to make sure investigate very carefully before swallowing whole systems of theology. Two very good questions to ask a dispensationalist. Can you explain in detail the 7-year tribulation and how Daniel 9 teaches this? That would be the first question. The next question you could ask is, where does the Bible teach that Jesus will return twice? Where does the Bible teach that? Or where does the Bible teach the secret rapture? I'm not saying there aren't good questions, aren't good answers to those questions. I'm simply saying those are very important questions to explain if you're going to accept this doctrine and this theology.